When it comes to getting from place to place, which do you think is more dangerous, a plane or a train? Most people would probably say that flying is way more dangerous. I mean, just imagine falling from 6 miles up, or even just over a mile. It's pretty much guaranteed you wouldn't make it. But if you're riding a train, everything feels smooth, safe, and easygoing. You're just sitting there, maybe about 5 feet above the tracks, watching the scenery roll by outside your window. Hey there, everyone! But here's the thing, it turns out that's completely wrong. Welcome back to our channel. Enough with the intro, let's dive right in. Which one's the illusion, danger, or safety? There's actually a specific formula that measures how safe something is, and it's based on how many people lose their lives over a certain distance traveled. According to that data, for every 100 million miles, plane crashes claim about 0.6 lives, while train accidents take about 0.9 lives. That's 50% more fatalities for trains than planes. But how can that be? Well, the truth is, air travel is under incredibly strict safety regulations. For example, trying to bring weapons, explosives, or anything flammable onto a plane is practically impossible. But on a train, you can carry just about anything you want. And year after year, planes keep getting closer to perfection, making every flight even safer than before. Trains, on the other hand, have been around since the 1800s, and many of those rail systems are starting to show their age. But there's another angle to all of this. Think about it. Nobody hops on a plane from London to New York just to get their heart racing, right? But plenty of people line up for a thrill ride on Switzerland's insanely dangerous Pilatus Railway just for the adrenaline rush. Half the fun of that kind of trip comes from the excitement and the risk. Still, there are places on this planet where riding a risky train route isn't just for kicks. It's the only way to get there, even if it means putting your life on the line. So now let's take a quick look at some of the most dangerous railway routes anywhere in the world. The Goteik Viaduct in Myanmar. This towering railway bridge was built back in 1900 in central Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, to connect the town of Pyin Oo Lwin, which was the summer headquarters for the British colonial government, with the town of Lashio. At the time, this was the tallest trestle-style railway bridge anywhere in the world, and even today, it still ranks as one of the highest of its kind. The bridge stands at a staggering 335 feet tall and stretches 2,260 feet across, supported by 15 steel towers that were manufactured at a steelworks in Pennsylvania. These days, only 2 trains cross this bridge each day, and most of the passengers on board are tourists. It takes about 25 minutes for the train to make its way across the viaduct, giving passengers plenty of time to soak in the dizzying views of the gorge and the mountains all around. The train creeps along so slowly that there's more than enough time to feel the sheer height beneath you and snap some breathtaking photos. But here's the thing, the slow speed isn't for the tourists' comfort. It's because this bridge, built over a century ago, could collapse without warning. Considering the age of the structure and the fact that it's just a single track running across a narrow bed with no guardrails, it really wouldn't take much for the whole thing to come down. Still, despite the danger, riding the Goteik Viaduct remains a favorite adventure, not just for tourists, but for plenty of locals too. The Gelmerbahn Funicular in Switzerland. The Gelmerbahn Funicular, along with the nearby Stoos Funicular, holds the title for having the steepest gradients of any ride of this kind in all of Europe. But unlike the Stoos Funicular, which only started running in 2017, the Gelmerbahn has been around since the last century. This funicular was originally built in 1920 to haul materials up for the construction of the Gelmersee Dam, and it wasn't until 2001 that it opened up for passenger rides. The track's average incline is an astonishing 106%. That's a slope of 46 degrees and 41 minutes, with the steepest section reaching 49 degrees and 4 minutes. The car holds just 24 passengers and climbs from the village of Handegg, sitting at 4,600 feet, all the way up to Gelmersee Lake at 6,070 feet in about 10 minutes. From the open-air car, tourists get an incredible view of the surrounding mountains, and once they reach the top, they can take in the stunning beauty of the crystal-clear alpine lake. The only downside? This breathtaking and honestly slightly nerve-wracking ride is only available for a limited season, from early June through mid-October. For the rest of the year, the funicular shuts down for safety reasons. The Ferro Bus of Bolivia. Now, on the other hand, Bolivia's rail bus, called the Ferro Bus, isn't exactly what you'd call a tourist attraction. The first reason? The Ferro Bus isn't something most tourists would even think about riding. And the second reason? For the Bolivians living in remote villages across the Andes, the Ferro Bus is just an everyday way to get around. What it really is basically a regular bus mounted right onto train tracks. And we're not talking about some fancy coach bus you'd use to travel between big cities. This thing looks like any run-of-the-mill rural minibus. There's no luggage space inside either, so passengers have to strap their bags onto the roof. This rail bus runs between Bolivia's capital, Sucre, and the city of Potosi, which sits deep in the heart of the Andes. The whole reason this Ferro Bus exists is because Potosi is so tough to reach by any other means. The railway, winding about 185 miles through the Andes, is pretty roughly built, packed with sharp curves and steep inclines, so much so that a standard train just can't handle the ride. That's why they decided to run the Ferro Bus along these tracks instead. But here's the upside. Even though it's not built for sightseeing, the few adventurous tourists who do ride it get a front row seat to some of Bolivia's most remote landscapes, sharing the journey with locals all the way up to Potosi, which sits at a breathtaking 13,420 feet above sea level, making it one of the highest cities on the planet. And trust me, Potosi itself is worth the visit. The Spanish founded the city back in 1545 at the foot of the Cerro Rico, known as the Rich Mountain. In fact, the name Potosi comes from Quechua and means rich mountain because deep inside that peak, the Spanish discovered enormous deposits of silver, which sparked the city's founding. Riding the Ferro Bus along those narrow tracks, weaving between rocks and skimming along cliff edges through mountain valleys isn't just an adrenaline rush. It's a rare chance to explore the hidden heart of Bolivia's rugged countryside. The Georgetown Loop Railroad. Can you imagine riding a railroad that's been in use for over 140 years? And if you're thinking that all of those years have made this ride any less terrifying than it was back in 1884 when it first opened, you'd be dead wrong. This narrow-gauge railroad connects the mining towns of Georgetown and Silver Plume, and even back then, it was hailed as a marvel of engineering. Silver was being mined in Silver Plume, but somehow they had to get all that ore down to Georgetown. The two towns are only about 1.2 miles apart in a straight line, but between them lies a massive, rugged gorge. So to bridge that gap, they built a winding railroad that stretched just under 4.5 miles. But those few miles, they're absolutely wild. To climb just 600 feet of elevation at a 4% grade, they had to construct 4 towering bridges, including one that still gives people chills today, the High Bridge crossing Devil's Gate. Despite the dangers, the railroad ran smoothly until 1932, when it was abandoned along with the silver mines that once kept it alive. It wasn't until 1973 that some history-loving folks in Colorado remembered this old track and saw its potential as a tourist attraction. Thanks to their efforts, the railroad was restored, and by 1984, tourists were once again riding these rails. Today, this line has become a must-visit for anyone into extreme tourism. And just making it across Devil's Gate is an adventure all its own. There, the train crawls across a nearly 150-year-old bridge that creaks and sways under the weight of the cars, inching its way along. And because the train moves so slowly on these narrow-gauge tracks, you've got plenty of time to soak in the fear. The only thing that might calm your nerves is the breathtaking beauty of the Rocky Mountains surrounding you, and the thought that the train definitely made hundreds of trips hauling heavy loads of silver ore across this exact same route. The White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad. The harsh wilderness of the far north is something not everyone can handle. Most folks prefer to live or spend their vacations somewhere a lot warmer. But for a certain type of traveler, it's that very danger that draws them to these extreme northern lands. For them, the riskier the journey, the more exciting it becomes. And the railroad connecting Skagway, Alaska to Whitehorse in the Yukon was built with exactly those kinds of people in mind. If you're a fan of Jack London, you've probably read his stories about the Klondike gold rush that swept across Alaska in the late 1800s. This narrow-gauge railroad, built in 1898, drained the wallets of countless gold prospectors chasing their fortune. The tracks cling to the dangerous rocky cliffs of snow-capped mountains, making it hard to imagine a ride more nerve-wracking than this. But no amount of danger could stop those prospectors, driven by the glittering promise of gold. And today's thrill-seeking adventurers are no different. They're not easily scared off by a tough route. The very same narrow-gauge track those prospectors once rode is still in use today. It starts from the coastal town of Skagway, winds deep into the Yukon Peninsula, and reaches all the way to Whitehorse in Canada. The full route stretches about 110 miles and crosses numerous mountain gorges along the way. One of the toughest stretches on the line is the White Pass itself, nicknamed the White Summit. But the highlight for most visitors comes at the very last section of the journey, designed just for tourists. On this final stretch, passengers switch to vintage locomotives to catch unforgettable views of the famous Whitehorse Canyon. It's even possible that Jack London himself, back when he was a young gold prospector, once rode one of these very cars. We've shown you some truly bone-chilling train routes today, but I hope it hasn't completely put you off traveling by this widely popular and convenient way to get around. In most developed countries, trains are seen as safe, smooth, and comfortable. But as you've seen, there are still places in the world where riding the rails can be downright terrifying. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, see you soon and goodbye.